directors for a community action program and also their health center. And I think it's all about relationships and integrity. And I think the superintendent is the face, along with the school board, the face of the organization. And it's so crucial. And so, again, I hope that my leadership ability comes through this interview.
Great. So if you could just kind of begin with, what do you think the most important first steps for a superintendent coming into a new district?
I think demonstrating that you're a learning leader, coming in and building relationships. Personally, I'd want to meet with the individual board members and get to know what's important to you. And I'd want to meet with the administrative staff individually, get to know them as leaders. I'd want to meet with all the stakeholders, you know, your regional school district. There's leadership in both Millville and Blackstone, I think, and be genuine. People need to know who I am as a leader. I'd want to know the operations. I'd want to know the buildings. I'd want to know about the transportation system. I'd want to be able to look at the budget and really understand. I want it to be operationally defined. You know, your mission, and all missions talk about high-quality education in the budget process and looking at core values. Well, how do we make that connection? How do we drill down and look at how the dollars are being spent? And I think that one of the first things I would do would be look at, in terms of the safety plan. What is your safety plan? I think as we went through a situation yesterday in Smithfield, we had a lockdown. And it's so crucial that everybody knows the plan. And it was going through my head that if I was just starting as a superintendent, it's one of the first things I need to know is what are the protocols, what are the routines. The communication is so crucial. You know, we had children texting from inside the high school and the messages and the news was flocking. And how do you address that? You know, we have a great protocol in place. So I think having, understanding what the safety measures in the school department, your safety plan are crucial. So.
Okay. Next question is going to be from Steve.
Okay. One of the things we're trying to do is use data more effectively in our district.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk about a time in your experience where you have used educational data to become a change agent in your past school or any of your past districts?
Sure. I think when I started in Smithfield 11 years ago as a special administrator, special education and regular education were like parallel worlds. You know, there was, we had the special ed department, the special education teachers, and they were involved in the school, but they were separate. And, but every school at the time, we were talking about an all-kids agenda. And so what I was able to do was working with a local institution, Rhode Island College, and an incredible individual, Dr. Tony Antosh. And what we did was we brought all the stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, we brought town council members, we brought the union president from both unions, the non-certified, certified. We brought teachers, we brought parents, administrators, educational advocates. We had a retreat, and we used data called the National Longitudinal Transition Study. And it was a 10-year study done by the Federal Department of Education that looked at, had intensive data around outcomes for students with disabilities. And what we did was basically painted a picture that every child, the more time that children spend with typical peers, that the more successful they're going to be as adults. And it was you couldn't argue with the data. And so what we did is we kind of had this massive action to create momentum. And that was 11 years ago. And when I took over in the district, we had about almost 600 students, 580 students that were identified with disabilities. And we had 60 students out of district. And over time, in getting buy-in and empowering, leadership across the board in terms of teacher leaders, student leaders, parent leaders, obviously the administrative leadership team, we now have a culture that truly is an all-kids agenda. And our mantra is like, wouldn't you want to be able to work, any child that walks through that door as an educator, don't you want to be able to be successful? And so, what teacher is going to say no? But they know that we've met their needs. We've provided them the resources to do that. And that was all about data, because if we just told anecdotal stories, they'd say, yeah, okay, but then they go back acting out of habit, which is, acting without thinking. So that was my first real experience using data to make, systems change. And I think it's a cultural change.
Okay. A sort of related question. What kind of data would you use to design professional development for the staff? And then also, what data would you use for personnel evaluation going forward? So how would you use data for professional development and then
Well-
personnel?
So I think, in the evaluation system, in terms of professional development goals, looking at what individual teachers have set for goals and looking at their performance and through the process, especially through the formative assessment piece, I think that would be the data that would indicate, so we look at that in terms of, is it individual teachers, is it at grade level, is it district, is it building-based, is it district-wide? So that should help drive professional development as well as student performance data. Looking at, when we start looking at, when I'm looking at your, I was going to say kneecap, but looking at your MCAS scores and seeing, looking at the different schools. You have 2 schools that are level 1, other schools at level 2, and understanding in Massachusetts, it's challenging. It's very challenging. There are people who believe that the system was set up, and I'm not saying I believe this, but there's people that believe the system's set up just to, through ed reform, to promote just the creation of charter schools. We know it's very challenging, but I think, really drilling down, making sure that not only myself, but all the administrative team and the teachers understand, that data use piece. But I think we would drill down that. I would really look at that student performance data and see what systems we have in place to collect that data to help also, support the professional development.
Great, thanks you.
Wendy?
My questions are centered around curriculum, and you touched upon my first part of the question, actually second part of the question in your previous answer, but I'll ask it again.
Sure.
So my question has 2 parts. How will you ensure that our district's curriculum and teachers' instructional methods are aligned pre-K to 12 and implemented in a way that enables students to meet content standards? And the second part is, how will your doing so bridge the gap between special education and regular education between across the district? So bridging that gap between special ed and
Sure. So let me give you for example. For example, I think for us, the best way that we've done and that I've been in part of in terms of curriculum development is bringing people together and developing a product. So when we did the Common Core, I just want to make sure I answer your question here. When we did the Common Core crosswalk, instead of just having people look at documents, what we did is we looked at our current curriculum. And then we looked at what the Common Core required, and then we actually designed units incorporating 21st century skills in terms of ensured that there was, the assessments were built into these units and that technology was embedded. We ensured that technology was embedded in every single lesson. We want teachers using technology all the time. But by bringing teachers together, so not just horizontally, but vertically, bringing, looking at, so if we're looking at math and science, looking at from pre-K to 12, bringing teachers together and providing that opportunity and time for them to work together. A great way for us at the elementary level was developing standards-based report cards, because now we had to take that alignment, but now we had to put it into user-friendly terminology that parents would understand. In fact, tonight we have a meeting that I'm missing, but it's about the Common Core, because we have a group of individuals and parents that feel that the Common Core, as most communities have, is inappropriate. But it's having teachers, using teacher leadership and bringing teachers together and providing that time and making sure. So what we did is, when I answered that question previously around special education, if you think about it, it's all about curriculum. It's all about accessing the curriculum. It's about assessment, formative, summative assessment. It's about instructional strategies, interventions. And so we've made sure in our shift, in terms of that cultural shift, was to make sure that special ed is part of the conversation. That when I said that there was that parallel universe, special educators need to be viewed as instructional experts. In that shift, that it's not just working with that core, but they're pulled into all conversations. When we have data days, bringing groups of teachers together at grade level or content level at the high school, making sure special ed is part of that, and using their instructional expertise to help drill down and narrow those gaps. So I feel that it's all one conversation. We've brought everybody to the table, and it truly is an all-kids agenda. But you have to provide people the time and the resources to do that.
Okay.
Do you want to go?
This one's just a follow-up. How will you introduce change where change is needed in a curriculum?
Through exposure, through buy-in, through getting to understand. I believe in win-win situations. I don't like compromise, because I feel like in compromise there's losing. It doesn't mean that there aren't, that I don't change my opinion, but I think through keeping dialogue open, that mindsets can shift and change. So I think the way you do that is to be very transparent, to explain to individuals why you believe a change is necessary, to understand, to engage in dialogue, to understand their perspective, and then to give exposure. So if it's a concept, if it's a program design, have people go, explore, visit the programs. But it's engaging individuals in dialogue. And again, it's providing people the time and opportunity. You know, it isn't just through an email, it isn't just through a blog or through a website or through a new press release. It's face-to-face time with individuals. Again, it's predicated on trust.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Brian?
My question has to do with problem solving. Could you explain your problem solving approach? Can you give me an example where that problem solving approach was successful? And also an example of an experience that it wasn't, that process didn't quite meet your expected outcomes?
Yes. So my problem-solving approach is, I think, first is everybody has to be able to understand, identify, and agree with what the problem is. You know, you have to be able to identify what the problem is. The second process is, if we do nothing, what are the consequences? So if we don't implement any change, what are the consequences? If it's around a budgeting issue, what are the consequences if we don't allocate resources? If it's around a human capital issue, what are the consequences if we don't, make a change in terms of this approach? And then it's brainstorming, working collectively. If it's a group process, again, depending on the context of the problem, you know, sometimes it's a decision that a superintendent or as a special administrator I need to make. But making sure that I partner with individuals and communicating, you know, what the solution is, hopefully developing the solution, identifying the solution, and then developing a plan to implement the solution. And then an assessment piece, how we're going to evaluate if what we did was effective. You know, I think part of what I try to do is institute a culture of assessment. I think we want everybody, including students, to look at themselves on an ongoing basis. So a situation that I had was fairly successful, and I have to be cautious because I know this is being videotaped, right? So, because it was a personnel matter. So I'm going to shift that. We had a situation today where where we're looking at a change of a service delivery around special education, and people are concerned that if we shift the model, that it may be a detriment to individuals. And yet, research shows, again, using data, that this model is very effective with students. And we don't have any data that says it's not going to be effective in this situation. So I had to create this problem-solving process and dialogue process where I was able to get individuals to at least agree that, okay, for this time frame, we're going to buy in, because it's easy to get people to come to the table and say, yeah, they'll be part of the solution. But then behind the scenes, people are able to undermine a process. So to get people to verbally commit that we're going to give it this period of time frame, and what are our metrics going to be to assess the performance. And then at that time, if the performance isn't where we think it will be, then we'll look at going into another direction. So that was something I felt was successful. Times that I've been successful, it haven't been successful, and are, I think, when I wanted to force an issue. You know, maybe it was some pressure, putting a program together very quickly around adopting a certain intervention. And one thing I always say is that, you know, I may pick a wrong intervention and I'm not going to lose my job, but if I do something that's going to cost the district $1 million, I'm probably going to lose my job. So this had to do with an intervention, a social-emotional intervention, and people weren't making a decision, and I kind of forced the issue and allocated dollars for people to go, and it wasn't that successful. I should have stepped back and taken a little bit more time. And I didn't really use the problem-solving process. I wanted to have something in place. It was near the end of the school year. I don't know if that's a great example, but that's the...
That's good. And within your problem-solving process, how do you determine, and when do you determine when you should delegate or escalate?
Well, so I think, again, it has to be in the context of the situation. I look at myself as one of, I think when I interviewed earlier with the screening committee, I look at problem solving as one of my strengths. I look at it, I'm a sum of all my experiences, and all the different leadership experiences I have. I bring that to the table. I find a lot of times when I'm dealing with individuals in problem solving, emotion or bias gets brought in. And I feel I'm very effective at identifying what the emotion and the bias and putting it aside. Secondly, I'm able to look at things from multiple lenses. And I feel sometimes you have to do that in a heartbeat, right? But I'm able to look at things from different perspectives. Whether it's a charged parent meeting, whether it's a contentious administrative team meeting, whether it's going before the union to talk about some potential changes and being peppered, I'm able to look at things from multiple perspectives. So I think, depending on in the context of the situation, I often delegate. I'm able to do so many different activities, I think, as a special ed director, because that's my leadership style. So I'm always looking to partner with people and empower people. In terms of escalating, I think if it's not a good solution, if it's, again, like that example I used where I forced an issue, I think, again, keep on dialoguing to make it till we get to a win-win situation. But again, it depends on the context of the situation.
Okay, good, thank you.
Great. Erin?
If you could describe the various ways that you would communicate as superintendent to the school committee, to staff, to parents, students, and the community, and just give us some examples of the tone you would use, the manner and style you would try to come across with.
So I think one of the things that I would do would be looking at developing a communication plan, I think, and I think a lot of large districts, maybe just for the sake, because they're so large, have to develop it. I think any effective district or system needs to have a communication plan. And I don't think there's one means of communication. I know this question was asked me before. I feel that it's important to understand what a preferred means of communication is for different stakeholders. Some people like email. So, it isn't that we're just going to do email. We're just going to do an email blast. We're just going to do a blog. We're just going to post it. I find that sometimes, there's many different ways to communicate, and we need, and by developing a communication plan, one of those crucial pieces is doing a needs assessment in terms of what ways do people like to be communicated? What ways do parents want to be communicated? What way does the town council, president, or the town council, the school committee, different members might want to be communicated differently. So I think it's not a simple answer. It's complex. The tone depends on the information. I don't think anything controversial should be handled in email, and yet I find that it becomes the most preferred communication for many people. I feel that they're so easy to read into an email, and so anything that's emotionally charged, I give topical information in an email, but anything that's emotionally charged, I think it has to be, if I'm going to write it, it has to be well thought out, has to be previewed by others before I post it. I believe in those things, forums, face-to-face, accessibility is crucial. So tone is, again, you have to look at what is the message you want to convey, to whom do you want to convey it to, and then look at the appropriate tone, around budgeting. Budgeting's an issue for everybody. How do we present the needs of the district without having this alarmist mentality or perception? How do we get out front of that information, and I think just putting it in through a reporter. I think, having these public forums and, being as transparent as possible is crucial. So it really depends on the information that's being communicated. So it's two-way, and communication needs to be two ways. It isn't just the community or the superintendent to the school board community, but to the superintendent, but it's, we need to be thinking about all communication. We have to make opportunities for two-way communication.
And just to follow up, if you could share with us how, as superintendent, you would gain the support of the two communities and have them come together to do what's needed for our district. More specifically, if you had to gain support for an additional contribution at the town meetings, when our budget is the largest line item
Right.
for the towns already.
Right. And that's every community, right? So being visible, I want to know who these people are. I want to know what's important to them. I want to know what so when I talk about the leadership of the community first, I want to know what their perception is of the schools. What do they see as the value of education? I think it's so crucial. to give me some insight. The other thing that I think is important is that how do we make sure that every stakeholder is emotionally connected to the Blackstone Millville School District? If you think about your favorite soda, you think about your brand of car, or your loyalty to a dry cleaner, there's this connection. And I think we need to do the same thing. You know, we're a business, and we can't forget that. And how, you know, what's our branding? You know, why should a senior citizen that lives in Millville, that hasn't had somebody in school, you know, and tells you the story about how they walked up the hill to school, you know, both ways in the snow, what's the value of education, you know? And so how do we have to identify who these stakeholders are, and then how do we connect them, you know? One of the things I've been trying to do in our school district for years, and it hasn't happened, is with technology. Look at the technology you have here. You know, you literally trip over it, right? Being a little facetious here, but how often, like, we have senior citizens whose let's face it, children grow up and they move, that would love to be able to come into the schools. We could have high school students, middle school students, teach them how to Skype, how to communicate, email. That would get them connected. They would see value, something very simple. We've been trying to do, we haven't been able to accomplish that for a lot of reasons, but I think you have to, why should people contribute more to the schools? And I think that's the school board. When you look at part of the responsibilities, right, is that public relations piece, but I think that's a superintendent. But you have to build relationships. It has to be trust. And you have to be passionate. You know, you can't be up there and whining and complaining and crying poor, and we've been level funded for 5 years. And, I mean, those are the facts maybe, but we have to get people to value. We know that it's a #1 variable for, in most communities, for property value. You know, realtors in Smithville, where I am, we just had a performance audit, and we were ranked, you know, it said one of the best school systems in the state. They ranked special education as an exemplar. We have population that's flat, but we have many people moving in with students with, you know, very intense needs. And it's a double-edged sword, because you feel really good, but you also know it becomes a financial responsibility. But I think we need to get people connected in charge, or continue on the work that you're doing. But people need to see value, right? You can't just say we need more money, but we need to get them emotionally connected, and every stakeholder has to see value.
Thank you.
Diane?
If you came across a new educational program or concept that had considerable merit, how would you introduce it to the school system and deal with possible resistance to it?
I would, again, so I'm a strong believer in teacher leadership. I mean, I think it's crucial that, you know, we need to have leadership at every level. It doesn't mean that it's not okay to be a follower. I think we all need to be followers at times. But I would pull people together and have people go and expose them. You know, if it's up to me to sell, you know, I'll sell if people come, you know, if people buy into it in the school department or English department at the high school says, we really need this, this is the data, it indicates that we can close this achievement gap, we know that this is going to put us over the top, and they, you know, they have all the data, then my job is to sell it to the school board with them, right? But I think, so I'm just kind of shifting the paradigm on your question here. I think I would get teachers to, or if it's a clinical program, if it's some social emotional piece, you need to get I would get the teachers. They're the ones that are operational. You know, I look at administration as tactical. I look at the school board as strategic, and I would get them to expose them to it, to go explore it, make a list of pros and cons. You know, because if I have to sell it to them, right? If somebody has to sell me something, it kind of is like, without their intervention, I probably wouldn't buy it. So I'm trying to shift that. I would want them to sell it to me and say, hey, this is something we have to do. I don't know, I'm not trying to be evasive, but I think that's where it has to come from. You know, I'd say, hey, I heard about this great program. Would you be interested in going taking a visit or doing some research? And, you know, so I have to come to the table. I'm going to meet them in terms of, okay, they'll need a sub or whatever. That would be my piece. So that's how I would operate. That's how I do operate.
You want to do another one, or you?
No, but
You good? Okay. Mike?
Hey, how you doing tonight?
Good.
I'm the budget guy. I like numbers. So maybe you could share with the committee some of your experience with budgeting in a K-12 district, and maybe some of the creative approaches you've made in order to ensure services while also operating within a limited framework.
Yeah, so sometimes so I'm the special education director for Smithfield. But if you look at what I do, I participate, and I say I'm not just an experience, like my superintendent says, come to the budget workshop so you can, understand, you get a flair for budgeting. I sit with as a special administrator, I've balanced the budget for the last 12 years. In fact, for many years, I've contributed $200,000-$300,000 back to help balance the budget, and obviously if I'm chosen to move forward, you can verify this information. I have to look at not only balancing the budget, but I have to look at pre-K to 21, where in Mass it's 22, looking at programs and making sure that we have equitable distribution of resources. And I was fortunate in a way. I talked about the scenario I inherited, but that was pretty typical back, 10, 11, 12 years ago when, we didn't pay for health benefits, right? It wasn't even considered a cost. And out-of-district placements where, certain kids just didn't belong in public school, and we felt we were doing a service to them to get them the help that they needed. And I was able to, so I had a pocket of money. I didn't have to go asking for money. We had, I don't know, maybe close to $2 million in tuitions. And so I was able to use, again, that shift, that cultural shift in getting people to be willing and believing that this is the best place for children. I was able to reallocate those dollars. And so from the years, that's how we've built capacity. We have, when you send a student out of district, and some children need to be out of district, I'm not saying they don't, but that money tracks with those children. When you reallocate that and provide resources within a district, not only are those, is it better, and the research shows that it's much better for those individuals to be educated with their peers, but now those resources are available to everybody. And so over a course of 3, 4, 5 years, we were able to bring those out of district, and this is just one example, bring these out of district resources to the district, and they're available to everybody. So when we have more clinical help, that clinical help is available to teacher X that doesn't have a special ed child in their classroom, but has a child that, is exhibiting some behavioral issues, to go in and provide support. Now we're building capacity with that teacher. So when you multiply it exponentially, these resources coming back, and my mantra to the school board becomes about cost avoidance. So now it's not about costs, it's not about bringing money back, because we don't have a lot of kids out of district. Last year, this year we had 2 students out of district. Our numbers have dropped for special ed to just a little over 11%, from almost 580, 600 to 259. Because the kids that we truly have that are identified as special education truly have a disability that's blocking them from learning. But all those resources are available. So if you look at our budget is increased, but it's usually just salary and benefits and purchase services, where a lot of, in Rhode Island, where tuitions are, that has been flat for 5, 6 years, and even a decrease. So I think that was an effective strategy that I was able to utilize, but it was with the trust of the school board, because I actually sit with the school board in Smithfield, so I have a strong relationship with them. And I meet, the other piece is meeting with the business manager, or meeting, with the fiscal, it's a chief fiscal officer. I've met with him on a weekly basis, because budgeting is every single day. I know we have a budget cycle, but to really be involved in I'm sure you know better than I do, as being a numbers guy, it's about looking at situations on at least a weekly basis. Like I said, I don't know of a superintendent that's ever been fired because they picked the wrong math program, but I see a lot of superintendents, moving on, let's say, because of financial mistakes. So that's one example. Just the other day, we had a budget hearing, and we can only ask for 4% from a cap from our community. And we had as a school board, we decided to pass a budget, push forward a budget that was 3.8%. So, but we had to reduce $2.1 million. And so even though I'm the special ed director, I sat with the business person, and we looked, and we were able to come, we were able to verify our healthcare costs, bring them down, that we put in 15%. We were able to drop that to 10. We found out that they were going to be 3%. So looking at in special education with purchase services, we were able to cut almost $240,000 out. Just knowing that, because we're on top of it and we look on a weekly basis, that we felt that we could make up some of the money. So, working as a collaborative you know, it's a collaborative process, but working with everybody and being transparent and being, you know, an ongoing, again, not just that budget cycle, but an ongoing process. I think that's very cost-effective.
Thank you. I have a follow-up on a different topic. And it's always in the news these days. It seems like there are a lot of experts in about the future of public education in America. And I'm just wondering, you know, where do you see public education over the next, say, 6 to 10 years, and how do you prepare our learners in order to be full members of this global and 21st century?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's not a school district around that doesn't have something in their mission or vision about, you know, global, you know, being a part of a global community and 21st century learning skills. But how do you do that? I'm not sure 15 years from now if we're going to see even comprehensive high schools the way they are. There's a great book, it's called Off the Clock, and it's this gentleman, Fred Bramante, and he was chairman of the Board of Regents in New Hampshire. And they look, in New Hampshire, the regulations allow, they didn't mandate seat time. So we have so much time in Rhode Island, we have 300, different, you know, depending on the level, but 300 minutes, 360 minutes. They waived that in New Hampshire. They gave a lot of flexibility. They had extended learning opportunities, which they gave credit for. They got rid of the Carnegie units. So that, and it wasn't eliminating jobs, but for instance, if a child's in dance class 4 days a week, or swimming lessons, or a soccer club, they felt that they could have a phys ed teacher instead of teaching phys ed now. Part of their job could be going out and making sure that what they were doing, connecting it to the standards, and gave a lot more flexibility, a lot more opportunity for business partnerships. Unfortunately, in New Hampshire, very few school districts, if any, have really embraced this. I think that, you know, we have to be upfront with, when we talk about 21st century learning skills, looking at, you know, that's the whole idea with the Common Core, you know, looking at equitable distribution and development of skills that are really that have been tested to improve and benchmarked internationally, that kids will be college and career ready. But we have to create those partnerships. Do we know what jobs are going to be available 15 years from now? You know, I don't think we do. I think in the next 5 years, jobs are going to be developed and identified in skill sets that are necessary that we may not be preparing. So I think we have to be flexible. We have to be open to change and be willing to embrace change. And I think really connecting with the business partnerships, you know, really connecting with higher education. You know, we hear all the knock, and I'm sure you hear too, that a lot of our students aren't coming to school, aren't going to college ready. And so I think we have to really, again, and I'm not sure where, you know, you are as individuals in terms of the Common Core, but, you know, I think there's an image issue with it. I think that it's, you know, there's an issue, I think, around the park assessment, but I really believe that it's going to put us in the right direction if we can, you know, ensure that there's fidelity with implementation and that the teachers have the resources and the ability and the students have the resources. I think that's going to prepare us for that flexibility. So I know it's a wide, broad brush answer, but I think having leadership that is open to change and that is confident and that embraces change. You know, when I say leadership, it isn't just at the top. It's leadership. You know, so that's my roundabout way of answering that.
Thank you. Kathy?
What has been your greatest professional disappointment, and what did you learn from it?
I think my greatest professional disappointment was when I went to Oxford, Mass. That was my first experience as a special ed administrator, director of special services. It was a way to throw everything under, like Title I and ELL and McKinney-Vento. And I was hired my first school committee meeting, and I loved the superintendent. His name was Dr. Dan Iverson. I loved him. He was incredible. I had a friend that worked there. I met with him. My first school committee meeting I went to, I was hired by him. The second school committee meeting I attended, he resigned, effective June of that year. And he was a long time, you know, been there for forever, You know, he was a strong member of the community, was going to stay there, and I just felt, you know, in my role, there was definitely some changes that needed to be made, and I felt I didn't get the support with him in his position, unfortunately, with the school board. We had to make some tough decisions, and, you know, so it was very, very difficult, you know. I look for a place that I can fall in love with and fall in love with the people. You know, I love the people I work with. I truly do, and I hope that they feel the same about me. And I didn't go there expecting not to be there, but I made you know, it was a tough decision. And I realized halfway through the year that I was just starting my career, and I could do better, you know, with the support. Because he'd give me lots of advice behind the scenes, but that was it. You know, I had a school board that was, you know, questioning where I was going on a Saturday. Now, that wasn't there, you know, he'd say to me, legally they're not supposed to do this, but they're wondering why your mileage sheets, and I'm volunteering my time to go to a conference on a Saturday. So that was for me, it was very challenging. You know, I don't like to fail. I like to be successful, so I've learned from that. You know, I mean, when I went to Smithfield, the first question when they asked me, I asked the superintendent, I said, I don't mean to put you on the spot when he was with the school board, but I said, how long do you plan on being here? Because it's crucial. Leadership is crucial. You know, some of the questions I'd have for you is I'd let them know about the change and how long you've been on the board and what's in terms of the politics, in terms of elections. I think it's so, you know, you could have a turnover, and then somebody's hired and then you're not their guy, so, or the person. So that was the biggest challenge or a challenge for me, something I learned from, so.
Do you have a follow-up, Wendy?
No, I'm good, thanks.
I'm going to follow up.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Okay, you stated earlier that you reduced your out-of-district placement from 60 to 2. That's amazing.
We had to earlier this year, but
Okay. So how did you go about developing the programs that were necessary in order to bring those specialized kids back? And do you benefit from that? Do other districts tuition into you to help you with that?
we've had that. We have that right now, the tuition piece. I mean, again, I think everybody wants to be successful. You know, I think that one of the greatest challenges that we all have, is this constant thread that runs through us, is fear. And I feel that, you know, if you have a child that's learning disabled and really struggles with reading or writing, and people are willing to go to bat, and they're willing to do anything they can do. But if you have a child, a 5-year-old, that tells you where to go every single day and is distracting the rest of the class and can be violent, there's a lot of fear. And what I did was, I explained before about how we shifted the culture, but by putting resources in place, I say to people, I would never ask you to do more with less. That there's a partnership. They're willing to do the work. I provide them the resources, the opportunity. That's the fight that I fight. And so over time, when people start, me coming and saying, hey, this is a wonderful program, it could be, I could be a used car salesman, you know, nothing against used car salesmen, but in terms of the image that a lot of people have, the teachers that have been part of this change are the people that sell the program. You know, they're the ones that have been the strongest advocates. When you see that you can be successful with a child, you know, and now I have a teacher come forward at a meeting and model for another teacher, or, you know, having teachers go into a classroom and watch how this teacher interacts with the children. Let's have those resources available in a school. So, you know, it's over time, but there hasn't been, you know, there's always been initially some resistance, but it's all based on fear. I think when people see, like we talked about, you know, the curriculum piece, let people develop products. Let's not just talk about it. Let's develop a product. What's this going to look like, right? Because experience brings knowledge to life. It makes it personal. Well, the same thing with these programs. You know, we didn't shift program, you know, for instance, we had one integrated kindergarten classroom. We had all these kids, preschoolers, out of district. Well, we knew we could create a program. So we hired a great teacher, we had space, and not only did we bring all the kids back, but when kids were identified, as they always are, now we had a place for them. You know, and we have a therapeutic behavioral program. We have a lot of kids that have some serious, elementary kids, serious psychiatric needs. We brought in consultants. We have We have a therapeutic classroom. We support teachers with students in the classroom. We provide subs, so we have intensive team meetings. You don't need to do this every week for every child, but there are some kids that they need that. So the product sells itself, but it's the teachers that are the biggest salespeople. So this has happened throughout our community. And parents that were fearful, like a lot of parents, it's not that they want their children to be educated with their peers, but when you're in a public school setting and you're getting a call from an administrator on a daily basis because your child's a problem, and then you go to another district placement and you don't hear from them, it's respite, and they deserve that. So the buy-in from the parent was, we're going to work with your child. We want your child to be successful. We're not going to call you every single day. We'll partner with you. You know, we'll partner, but we're not going to be calling you as if it's your fault. You did something wrong in your child, you know. So, you know, there was a lot of shifts in our behavior that sold the programs over time.
And as a follow-up of the, say, of the $33 million budget that you have this year,
Yeah.
about what's the percentage of it that would be fall under your realm or your,
I think about 7 million.
about 7 million? Okay.
So, yeah, I think about 7 million, but most of that is salary, I would say. Yeah, maybe about 70% is salary, 75%.
Yeah, that's a
And then we have purchase services, but, you know, most of my peers in the neighboring communities have $2-3 million of out-of-district tuitions, you know? And with the purchase services, we're able to keep that pretty much, you know, cap. And the bottom line is that everything we do, right, about leadership, the superintendency, it's all about improving student performance, you know? And when you look at, you know, in Rhode Island, we have intensive graduation requirements. There's a panic. There's lawsuits out there because of our requirements. We have 5 children in our district that are struggling to graduate. You know, there are districts that have 100, 200 children because we have those resources and supports, which is, you know, but it takes time to build that. But it was a cultural shift, and the school board is behind it. They see, you know, that you know, special ed isn't, as you know, it's unfortunate, but a lot of times you read it's special education, and it shouldn't be, because somebody's born a certain way. It shouldn't be labeled as something negative, but we often see that in the paper, special education costs, tuition costs. We haven't had that for 10 years.
Very fortunate.
So I have a follow-up. I'm sorry.
I
Oh, you
have
want to
one.
go? Go ahead. You go
Can
ahead.
you talk about where you think the role of business partnerships with schools, what they can play in developing a district and programs?
So one thing I realize about relationships is when you create a partnership, years ago I'd get into a relationship and I think I know exactly what I want from it. Today I realize that when I create a relationship, I have no idea where that will go. So I think that there's probably a lot of businesses, and my way of answering that is that there are a lot of, so we have partnerships with Bryant University. We have multiple different types of partnerships with them. We got into it maybe for, there was one specific reason that we had a partnership with them, and it was because they have facilities, and we're able to use their facilities. But now we have, right, they have beautiful facilities, but we have, was it the FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America? They support, they give us a full scholarship every year for that. They have an MAT program. See, one of the things I think is when you create partnerships, it can't just be what can you do for me, right? It has to be what can we do for them, right? We have to kind of shift that. Because a lot of times schools are just asking, please give, please give. Well, so we need to be thinking, what can we do for the business partnership? You know, what's in it for them? So Brian has an MAT program now, so they have all their practicum students spend time with us. They have a program, I've been to China twice at no cost to taxpayers. We have this program called the Confucius Classroom. It's part of the Confucius Institute. And we talk about that global economy, that we have students every year for minimal cost are spending 2 or 3 weeks in China learning Mandarin. We have programs within our elementary schools, our middle school, and our high school where we have programs on a weekly basis where students are learning about the language and culture. Bryant University provides graduate students that are coming down, or professors that are at no cost are sharing this expertise with our students. It's funded partially by the Chinese Republic of China. They want people to understand that China is different. There's obviously a lot of issues still in China, but it's not the same China that existed 20, 30 years ago. And so they're investing resources. So we look at it, it's a win-win. You know, we had a lot of controversy around that. We have a great partnership with Fidelity. With Citizens Bank as a headquarters call center. We have a partnership with Navigant Credit Union. We talk about financial literacy. They put on events for our middle schoolers where they give them X number of dollars, and all the Navigant people, you know, the employees help, and, you know, they have to take care of their car, they have to look at, you know, investments, college, and they spend a whole day at Navigant. But we fostered these. Again, it's just through relationships. So I think here it's exploring, you know, we want opportunities for our high school students, but for all of our students. And it's exploring what those partnerships could be. And, you know, I think we obviously want to look for opportunities for our students to explore, you know, vocational opportunities, exposure. But I believe in terms of dialoguing with the staff here and with the school board, what are the needs? Where are our gaps? You know, and then looking at those opportunities to create those partnerships. But always thinking about what can we do? How can we support them? You know, we offer a lot of support to our Chamber of Commerce. You know, even if it's just hosting meetings for them. You know, we've got to be thinking about what can we do for the stakeholders, not just what can they do for us.
So, do you want to go? Go ahead.
It kind of bridges from part of your answer. We are a district that participates in school choice, and we have a highly respected tech school locally. And we seem to have a large decrease in enrollment every year from the 8th grade to the high school. So tell me some of your ideas that you would use to try to retain students within our district for all grade levels, but more specifically from the middle school to the high school.
So a couple things. One is that, again, why would taxpayers want to contribute? Why should they contribute more money to the budget, right? Why? We want to make it, we would want to make it so that going to, whether it's the Voc school, whether it's a private school, parochial school, a charter school, we want to make that so it's a very tough decision on a family. And I think we have to, like, I would want to know why assessing, do we do some type of exit interview with families and inquire why? Is it just the Voc school? Are there other reasons why that students are leaving, families are placing their children, I mean, sometimes it's a legacy thing. We have people that have gone to Mount St. Charles and they want their children to go, and I understand that. But there are a lot of other reasons. And so I guess to answer that question, I'd want to know what those reasons are, in terms of why are families, why is enrollment decreasing? And then how do we change that? Again, where are the top students in your high school going to college, right? Are they getting into the top colleges in the country? If not, we need to address that. And that, we address that, again, I look at a multiple measures approach, but also there's, the term equifinality, it's kind of, there's many ways of skinning a cat, right? I think that there's potentially many solutions, but we have to target those areas. And before you can move to where you want to be, you have to kind of know where you're starting. So I would want to know why. And then we have to answer that question, make it a tough decision. It goes back to the whole thing about being emotionally charged. You want this to be the legacy. We want people to be proud, and I'm not saying there aren't. There are families that I'm sure are very proud. In the interview, there were parents that were very proud about the schools and what the schools have accomplished for their children. But we want that to be a tough decision for every family. So I know it's not a specific answer, but I think it's, that's how I would approach it. I'd have to do, talk to all the stakeholders. I want to know what you think, why. You have insight, and that would be my charge to with you, with your support, to work strategically, tactically with the administration, and then to put things in place with the teachers. And
thank you.
Any other questions that people have? Go ahead.
You probably know this, but we're at some point going to be looking for an assistant superintendent as well. So could you just think kind of out loud, how would you sort of define your role and their role and different tasks between the two of you, and what your relationship might be between the super and the assistant superintendent?
Yeah, well, I think there has to be obviously, if you look at the organizational chart, I would assume it would look at the superintendent, the school board, superintendent, assistant superintendent, and then, but maybe not. you know? So my first part would be, I'd want to know what your vision is for that. Not knowing that, I would say my vision would be, obviously, some form of shared leadership. I think identifying roles. Unfortunately, a lot of times assistant superintendents end up taking on their curriculum people, and then they take on everything that the superintendent doesn't want to do. So I guess, you know, I would want to have a dialogue with the school board in terms of what your expectations are. You know, I am aware that, and I'm aware of the individual, you had offered a job to an individual, and they didn't, you know, they didn't take the position. And since then, the position hasn't been filled. And I don't know a lot about that, but I would really, you know, again, not avoiding the question, but I want to know what your expectations are, because I think we need to be on the same page. I would definitely want someone. I mean, you know, everything we do is about, I think a major responsibility for the superintendent is to make sure that every child has the best teacher that they can have in front of them, that with the resources that are necessary. I think that's the responsibility. You know, unless a superintendent's fortunate enough to be able to build a building, your legacy is the people you hire, right, and the leaders that you grow. And so I think partnering with the assistant superintendent on that role is so crucial. And I think it is important that you need someone that has that. You know, I read a lot of your literature about making sure that there's consistency with curriculum across the two communities, but also resources. And I think that's important, and that person could help support that. But, you know, I would really want to know what your expectations are, you know, because I think, you know, it's important to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I would look at a shared responsibility and definitely identifying roles, but also in the absence of the superintendent, that person functions as the superintendent. I think that's important too, that you want someone that has an ability. I wouldn't want somebody that's just curriculum. You know, I would want somebody that has the ability, that has an understanding of budgeting, or knows that that'll be their responsibility, as long as a lot of, you know, personnel and all these other things that are very, very important to the implementation of effective schools and a high-quality education.
Any other questions, follow-up? So is there anything that we haven't asked about that you'd like to share with us?
No, I just hope that I view myself as, like I said, as a very effective leader. I think I've been very effective and successful at all levels, and I'm looking for a place where I can come and it sounds almost altruistic, but that where I can come and finish my career. I spent 11, 12 years in Burrville. This is my 11th year, and I'm looking for a community where I feel that not only is it, obviously this has to be a fit for you and the community, and I'm looking for a community that is a fit for me and my skills. And I think that, you know, hopefully that in some of my answers, you'll be the judge if this has been a match. But I'm looking for a place where I can come and just develop leadership. You know, I look at my role is about developing leaders at all levels, including student leadership, like I said, parent leadership, and continuing the work that you've done, but finding a place where I can just build relationships and be, I don't want to be just a good school system. I want to be one of the best. You know, I think I've done that in terms of special education. I think I've supported that in every organization that I'm part of. I'm president of the State Association of Special Ed Administrators in Rhode Island, and like I said, that and $1.07 will get me a cup of coffee at Cumberland Farms. But we've shifted the role of special education administrators, instead of being that position that's kind of out here in that organizational chart. You know, you have the superintendent, assistant superintendent, principals, special ed directors. Now we truly I led a strategic plan where one of the focus was making sure that we were district instructional leaders and statewide instructional leaders. And our membership has doubled in the last couple of years because that's what people get into this profession for. You know, they want to be viewed as instructional leaders. And I view myself as a true instructional leader, as a community leader. And I hope you look at all my experiences, many of them that I didn't discuss, and look at, again, my ability to lead successfully in every aspect that I've been involved with. So. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity. And I know it's just about 7 o'clock. That clock's
Well done.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really
Very
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I won't trip this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir?
You bet.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you.